Hi there, and welcome back to another daily dose of anime recaps. Today, we've got an exciting manhwa to introduce, Revenge of the Iron-Blooded Sword Hound. Meet Vikir Van Baskerville, known as the Hound of the Baskerville clan, dedicated to serving his clan and father with all his heart. But everything changed when he stood before the executioner's blade and experienced a profound awakening. As fate granted him a second chance at life, the story unfolded with thrilling twists. Join us a daily dose of anime recap to witness Vikir's journey and what he would do with this newfound opportunity. And if you enjoy the manga, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment for daily dose of anime recap. Vikir Van was the Hound of the Baskerville family. Just like his name suggests, he gave his all to serve the family and his father, but tragically, he met a terrible end. He was falsely charged and framed for being associated with the Demon Clan. Facing the guillotine, he made a solemn promise that if given another chance at life, he would never live the life of a hound again after taking down his prey. His wish came true, and Vikir Van indeed came back to life as a child. Inside the grand estate of the Baskerville family, Hugo Lee, the patriarch of the Baskerville family, entered the room and didn't seem pleased. Initially, Hugo thought there was no special child there, but then he noticed one child who stood out. While the other kids cried loudly, this particular child remained silent. He decided to move this non-crying child to the Cradle of Swords. When Vikir Van saw the main culprit who accused and killed him, he was filled with intense anger. In the past, born from an illegitimate family, he received training in a poor environment. Later, to help the Baskerville family become the best of the 7 families, he had to do all kinds of dirty work, from assassination, intelligence, ambush, to threatening. Vikir Van remained loyal, seeking recognition from Hugo Lee and the entire family. But much to his surprise, 10 years after the gate to the demonic realm opened and the fight against the demons ended with the humans being victorious, his loyalty was rewarded with abandonment by the family. Because he knew too much, he was put down and executed. Although he longed for revenge, his new body prevented him from taking immediate action. To become stronger, he had to pass the Cradle of Swords. The Cradle of Swords was a test that every child born into the Baskerville family had to go through. The kids were thrown into a maze of swords, and after going through that, they needed to get to the STYX River to be examined for their talent. The STYX River was a legendary river, capable of turning a child's body into iron. However, only a few children could endure it. In his previous life, Vikir Van was ousted by his siblings and couldn't receive the effect of the river. But after being reborn, he successfully passed the Cradle of Swords and reached the STYX River. To gain as many blessings as possible from the legendary river, he had to immerse himself in the water for a prolonged period. After 7 minutes without seeing him resurface, Hugo personally pulled him out of the river. As he lifted him, Hugo noticed that Vikir now had teeth. But what Hugo didn't know was that his seemingly talented son was consumed with thoughts of revenge. Not only did he want to bite off Hugo's head, but he also sought the complete eradication of the entire Baskerville family. In his previous life, when Vikir reached the age of 8, he was talented enough to be called a genius. However, compared to others in the family, he was just considered ordinary. By the time he turned 20, he was already entrusted with tasks such as assassinations, espionage, and conquest-type missions. At 29, he felt that he had reached his limit in swordsmanship compared to those of direct lineage. When he hit 30, the gate leading to the demonic realm opened, marking the beginning of the Demon Clan's invasion. Surviving for 5 long years in the midst of the destruction era, he managed to kill countless monsters. By the time he turned 39, the prolonged and arduous war finally concluded, with victory favoring humanity. A year later, he received a title for his loyalty, the Hound. Vikir woke up and realized he was in a nursery. As he joyfully thought about successfully absorbing the STYX River, a girl arrived. After placing a box in his crib, she immediately left. Curious about who had given a gift to an outsider like him, Vikir Van suddenly saw the box open. To his surprise, the box contained 2 fierce and rare bloody mambas. Without waiting for them to strike, he quickly crushed them. The following day, when people of the Baskerville family witnessed a peacefully sleeping child beside the corpses of 2 bloodthirsty snakes, fear engulfed them. As a result, all the nannies who had been on shift that night were sentenced to execution. 8 years later, Vikir was now studying alongside other young masters within the family. According to their teacher's explanation, a swordsman who couldn't yet imbue the sword with mana was considered a sword beginner. Conversely, Those who could infuse a bit of mana into their sword were known as sword expert. Moreover, if the blade emitted mana in liquid like aura form, they were referred to as sword graduator. And lastly, when that aura was not only solid but also changed shape at the swordsman's will, they were acknowledged as swordmaster. Upon learning that Hugo had become a swordmaster, Vikir seemed quite concerned. After their class, 3 young heirs approached Vikir. These 3 were the ones who baselessly accused and stabbed him when he was running away after the defamation during his previous life. They were nicknamed Hugo Le Baskerville's Trident and were just 9 years old at present. In order to confront them early on and prevent future trouble, Vikir decided to teach them a lesson. After updating Hugo about the situation at Ruby Mine, the major domo, John, informed him that Vikir had scored the highest on the writing exam regarding the interim evaluation of the juvenile fortress. The final matter John shared was about the battle among the young masters at the juvenile fortress. According to him, after the fight, Highborough's teeth were completely damaged, Middleborough's jaw had been smashed in, and Lowborough's left index finger was amputated. When Hugo learned that his 3 sons had fought each other because of Vikir, he was utterly shocked. A little while later, Vikir came to meet him. As soon as he entered the room, he greeted Hugo respectfully. When Hugo mentioned the injuries Vikir caused to the 9-year-old triplets in his senior class, Vikir feigned innocence and replied, "If you're referring to those brothers, I believe they've received proper medical treatment then." Hugo didn't seem pleased with his response and continued to question him about the matter. According to Hugo, since that day, the 3 masters had started eating separately and stopped talking to each other. Moreover, their combination technique was quite decent. But now their relationship was completely torn apart. When Hugo asked if Vikir thought he'd done anything wrong, Vikir turned the question back on him, saying, "How can the stronger person be wrong?" Vikir reiterated what Hugo had told a nun earlier, emphasizing that only the strong will reign supreme. Weakness is a sin. Surprisingly, Hugo seemed delighted after hearing Vikir's words. He not only praised Vikir, but also rewarded him, allowing him to pick his favorite food from the food storage. Before leaving, Hugo mentioned the interim evaluation and wanted Vikir to perform exceptionally well, ensuring he didn't lose to the direct descendants. After exiting the patriarch's room, Vikir followed the majordomo to the food storage. John and the 2 warehouse workers were surprised to learn that Vikir needed something different, not high-quality chocolate, but the cacao beans that have a rich aroma. As per his request, the warehouse workers provided him with a type of cacao bean with a rich aroma known as bloody bean. Since these bloody beans would be part of the practical test in 5 days, Vikir decided to give them a try beforehand. In this world, the Baskerville family was referred to as the Berserker family. All the kids born into this family received rigorous education. Once they were able to take their first steps for their basic stamina, they had to run up a steep mountain to build their endurance. At bedtime, they needed to sleep alongside a monster corpse to toughen up for the harsh environment. Once that phase ended, the 8-year-old hunting hounds faced incredibly difficult and terrifying evaluations. Today, the young hunting dogs gathered at the La Rouge et Le Noir mountain for the practical evaluation or survival exam. This ominous mountain was located on the outskirts of the territory and filled with monsters. As per the instructions of the family instructor, Pavlov Van Baskerville, Vikir, and the other young masters had to stay on the mountain for a month and hunt the malevolent monsters there. He also explained how to earn points in this practical test. After giving advice and reminders, he rang a bell to signal the start of the evaluation. To secure a good position, Vikir decided to head towards an area of interest from the previous year's test. The supervisor was amazed to see him approaching an unexplored area. He was even more surprised when Vikir chose such a dangerous place to settle. After surveying the area, Vikir looked for items to make a shelter. While the other kids were facing off against each other or battling monsters, Vikir was relaxing and resting. After following him for a few days, the supervisor got bored and eventually left. Once the supervisor was gone, Vikir gazed at the fire and recalled a camping experience from his previous life. At that time, his companion had taught him that cacao beans were used to make the fish smell less fishy, and bloody beans that had a high concentration of cacao were the best. A few days later, Vikir ventured into a restricted area. As he delved deeper, he suddenly caught a pungent scent. At first, he thought it was the smell of burning tree roots, but then he discovered a burning monster's excrement. Following the burning piles, he came across a hellhound with a risk rating at B+. In front of Vikir, the hellhound's entire body was engulfed in a strange and eerie inferno. In his past life, when he was 18, He had once battled one of these creatures. Now, with the strength of an 8-year-old child, he couldn't possibly take it down unless he had a plan. After a moment of staring at each other, both Vikir and the monster charged straight at each other. Due to his young size, Vikir skillfully evaded the Hellhound's direct attack by lowering his body and slipping under its belly. The first weakness of the Hellhound was that they could only move in straight lines. They found it difficult to suddenly change directions. While the Hellhound was still reorienting itself for another attack, Vikir took out his second item to deal with it. He grabbed a bottle of water since lookout monsters were unable to cross water, even if it might be a very shallow depth of water. As the Hellhound lunged at him with its mouth wide open, Vikir quickly threw something into its mouth and sidestepped to avoid it. After missing its bite for the second time, the Hellhound seemed to be very angry. But in less than a minute, its eyes grew dull and lifeless. Chocolate was poison to canines. And when it came to the bloody beans, which could make 100 liters of chocolate with just one of it, it was obvious that it would do to a canine monster. Vikir swiftly finished it off, pulling out his sword and thrusting it into a vulnerable spot without rib protection. When he stabbed its kidney, a stream of greenish air burst out. His body instantly absorbed the energy from the air, making him stronger. While he was contemplating the situation, he noticed several more hellhounds appearing behind him. Initially, he had planned to deal with the other hellhounds, but unexpectedly, a stronger monster showed up. Seeing the crazed dogs flee as soon as they spotted the three-headed Cerberus, rated a plus in danger, Vikir was puzzled. At first, he couldn't understand why a monster on the 9 there ridge appeared on the 1SD, but when he noticed the arrow wounds on its body, he deduced that someone was chasing it. And whoever could chase it all the way here must be from the barbarian tribe. Vikir saw this as a good chance to defeat this A+ rank monster. He believed that with his high level of expertise as a sword expert, it wouldn't be too difficult to take down this monster. Without hesitation, he charged straight at the three-headed dog. He intended to strike one of its heads, but to his surprise, another head tried to bite him. Swiftly evading, he immediately went in for another attack. He thought this time he would be able to defeat the three-headed Cerberus, but due to his slight carelessness, it gave the monster a chance to counterattack. In an instant, the three-headed Cerberus used its claws to send him flying far away. After crashing into a rock, Vikir spat out blood and briefly lost consciousness. Fortunately, he woke up just as the three-headed Cerberus approached him. Realizing his left arm was broken, he quickly decided to run and come up with a plan. Dodging the Hellhound's attack, he sprinted forward. If the Cerberus wasn't injured, it would have caught him and torn him apart. He saw a wall ahead and rushed towards it. Jumping over the fence, he kept running as fast as he could. The monster was still chasing him relentlessly. After running and searching for a while, he finally found his previous campsite. By now, the Cerberus was dangerously close. He gathered strength and leapt forward, successfully avoiding its sharp teeth that were almost at his head. Failing to catch him, the creature fell into a trap Vikir had set up days ago. As it dropped into the cradle of swords, numerous spears impaled its body. While the Cerberus suffered from the poison of the bloody beans on the spears, Vikir hurled a spear towards it with force. After receiving such a fatal blow, the deranged beast roared loudly. Even though it continued to move towards him, it stumbled and fell after taking only 7 steps. The spear Vikir used earlier had been laced with the bloody mamba's venomous fang. After successfully absorbing energy from the Cerberus, Vikir worried about what to do with its body. After some thought, he decided to head towards the dungeon it had been guarding. To avoid confronting other monsters, he used Cerberus's scent to disguise himself. Following its tracks and scent, he found the dungeon guarded by the Cerberus. In his past life, he had been to this dungeon before, but it had been empty inside. As he ventured deeper into the cave, he could smell mana mixed with decay. The further he went, the darker it became. This cave was filled with veins of ruby minerals, leading Vikir to believe it must be connected to the Red All Mountain. Venturing further, he noticed a dazzling red light up ahead. Suspecting it might be a dungeon, he shielded his eyes and ventured inside. Within, he discovered a colossal ruby stone. Initially, he thought he might be the first to stumble upon it, but he noticed dry bones scattered around, suggesting others had been there before. Approaching the bones, he observed signs of chaotic stabbings all over. The farewell letter left behind revealed the person belonged to the Baskerville family. According to the writing, this place was in Legend Dungeon. According to the letter, after that person and his brother triumphed over numerous monsters in this place, they were ensnared by a riddle for 3 long years. Vikir eventually found the riddle engraved on a stone column next to the glowing ruby. When entering, it's 1, but once inside, it's 2. When leaving, it's 1. After going through the riddle, Vikir read further into the letter and discovered that the two individuals were twin brothers who ended up killing each other because of the riddle. After killing his younger brother, the older brother gained nothing and left filled with regret. In the end, he left a message advising anyone who came after to leave this place immediately because everything here drove people with greed insane. Upon careful consideration, Vikir suspected the twins had misinterpreted the riddle. Based on his analysis, the correct answer seemed to be our own shadow. With determination, he decided to shatter the radiant ruby. Upon breaking it, a tremendous surge of power was unleashed. After the energy subsided, a dark and eerie sword remained on the stone pillar. Vikir speculated that it might be the relic of this devil's den. The inscription on the stone revealed that only those with Baskerville's blood would be able to take Beelzebub. Vikir feared that in the future, this sword could fall into the hands of demons, sparking countless wars against humanity. Yet, there was hope for change if he could draw the sword now. Filled with resolve, he attempted to pull the sword. However, the sword had an eerie nature, and it injured his hand, causing it to bleed. Oddly, the dark aura of the sword seemed to follow his blood, flowing into his body. Finally, the sword fused with his hand. After obtaining the Beelzebub sword, Vikir suddenly felt dizzy and collapsed on the ground. As he exited the cave, the sword's insatiable hunger and thirst continued to trouble him, making him extremely uncomfortable, as if his stomach was being torn apart. Suddenly, Vikir's sense of smell became sharp, and he caught a wonderful scent. At the same time, his right arm instinctively pointed in a direction, indicating that there was something edible over there. To his surprise, the sword led him to the corpse of the three-headed hellhound he had defeated earlier. While the sword absorbed the dog's blood, Vikir also felt his insides reverting back to normal. He guessed that the dryness of the plants and soil in this area might be caused by the sword in his hand. Later, he realized that the sword's ability was to absorb the skills of his opponents. Since the absorption amount was nearly infinite, countless people were said to have lost their abilities and turned obsolete. When he examined the sword's abilities, he was amazed to find that it had not only absorbed the skills of the Hellhound, ranked B+, and the Cerberus, ranked A+, but it had also absorbed the high-speed regeneration skill of the Norvegian sewer rat, ranked F. Finally, the practical evaluation exam came to an end. Upon learning that Vikir had defeated the A+ ranked Cerberus, Hugo immediately called him for a meeting. Hugo was surprised that Vikir had managed to defeat the powerful monster with chocolate. As a reward for ranking first in the evaluation, Hugo granted Vikir an additional request. Without hesitation, Vikir expressed his desire. "I would like to gain access to the 10,000 Epistle Library." The 10,000 Epistle Library was one of the largest libraries in the Empire that was located deep within the heart of the Baskerville clan. Only the Patriarch and the second-in-command, along with their direct descendants, were allowed access to it, so Hugo looked a bit awkward. Vikir thought he would be denied, but to his surprise, Hugo not only agreed to let him into the library, but also wanted him to go to the 6th restricted zone deep inside the library to read the Baskerville 6th technique. Vikir was taken aback because there had never been a case that an illegitimate child with the Van middle name was allowed to go past the 4th technique. Moreover, he also wanted to obtain the greatest essence of Baskerville, the textbook of swordsmanship containing the teachings of the first patriarch who was able to subjugate the 7 great disasters. After leaving Hugo's room, Vikir hurried to the 10,000 Epistle Library. It was his first time setting foot in this place. He wandered around until finally coming across the swordsmanship book, 6th technique Hugo had mentioned. Without hesitation, he unlocked it. As Vikir read through the swordsmanship book, memories of his past mistakes came rushing back. Because he had stopped the flow of mana when studying the 4th technique, he couldn't learn the 5th technique afterward. In the Baskerville family's sword techniques, depending on the stage of the sword, it was 1 tooth for the first technique, 2 teeth for the second, and so on. And when they drew teeth, a special trait, a red sword energy appeared. But today, his goal was different. He wanted to learn a level higher than the 6th technique. Ignoring the gossip of the 2 guards, Vikir entered the area where miscellaneous books were kept. After searching, he found the lurking ambush, the book on the basics of the 1st technique that the Baskerville children didn't read. Due to the ripped pages, it was a useless, miscellaneous book. But he knew the true worth of this book. In his previous life, when he was part of the Hound squad, he had found the remaining pages of this book. The Lurking Ambush book had an extraordinary pedigree, written by an ancestor of the Baskerville family, explaining how to reach the 10-take technique in swordsmanship. After spending a whole day studying, he had memorized the entire content of the Lurking Ambush book. Although he couldn't draw 10 teeth with his current body, he could achieve the 5-T technique. After some practice, Vikir managed to reach the 5 technique. He didn't just feel a warm sense of accomplishment, but also choked up a bit. He truly wanted to cry tears of joy because he had successfully attained the 5 technique. After successfully mastering the 5-tooth, Vikir could now enhance his mana even more. His hands were enveloped in a radiant red aura, and he felt the mana in his body increasing continuously. He knew he had advanced from being a high-class sword expert to a low-class graduator. Thinking about the level of swordsmanship he could achieve in the future, not just stopping at the 10th technique, but reaching an unlimited level, he felt really happy. Even if he put his mind to it, he might even be able to challenge a mid-class graduator. However, the biggest issue bothering Vikir now was whether he should let Hugo know about his newfound strength. After contemplating for a while, he took out an item. Under the influence of this item, he set fire to the lurking ambush placed on the windowsill. If it weren't for this lurking ambush, Hugo would not have been able to reach the 10 technique. Before he could completely burn the book, 2 guards rushed in. With his acting skills and way of speaking, Vikir managed to convince the guards not to report this incident. Not only that, they promised to keep this secret with him. A few days later, Vikir met Hugo. The aura was the sign that someone officially entered the world of the sword. Even geniuses had to train without rest until the age of 15 in order to reach the level of low-class sword expert. However, Vikir was merely an 8-year-old child, so Hugo didn't believe he had an enlightenment. After pondering for a while, Hugo decided to test Vikir. He arranged for him to face a monster. In the combat arena, Vikir would face a level C danger, a CR. As soon as Hugo gave the signal, the guarding knight removed all the restraints from the monster. The OCR roared loudly and charged straight at Vikir. Without dodging the monster's swinging arms, Vikir immediately drew his sword. He first cut off its arm and then continued to target its legs. Although the OCR possessed the high-speed generation skill, it couldn't activate it at the moment. While the others were astonished, Vikir infused his sword with a glowing red aura. Then, he charged straight at the monster and delivered a lethal strike. Despite witnessing the scene, Hugo still didn't believe that Vikir could defeat the OCR. He thought the monster was already weakened, which was why Vikir won. Unexpectedly, right after Vikir took down the OCR creature, he felt the urge to face another opponent. Wanting to part ways with Hugo, he decided to reveal more of his strength to him. If his progress was acknowledged, he could be dispatched to a remote area or admitted to an academy. After a moment of contemplation, Hugo agreed to let him have one more fight. This time, Vikir would be up against a monstrous creature known as the Troll. The Troll was incredibly aggressive, towering over OCR in size. Once given the green light by Hugo, Vikir charged directly at the creature, taking the initiative to attack. Upon seeing Vikir rush in, the Troll didn't stand idle either. It immediately swung its arm down with tremendous force. Vikir successfully evaded the attack and swiftly leaped behind the creature. According to Hugo's advice, if Vikir couldn't land a fatal blow, he would be merely wasting his energy. Not only that, he needed to come up with a clever strategy. The Troll kept launching relentless attacks, throwing powerful punches with high damage. After a series of evasive maneuvers, Vikir seemed to grow weary. Even though he could easily dispatch the monster, he hesitated, fearing that revealing his true strength might have consequences. After careful consideration, Vikir charged straight at the Troll just as it was about to strike again. With a sword thrust to its shoulder, the Troll let out a cry and collapsed to the ground. However, upon closer inspection, Vikir's previous attack hadn't inflicted serious damage. Despite Hugo allowing Vikir to end the fight, he wanted to continue. After much thought, he decided to let the onlookers see that he had leveled up from an epiphany during the fight. Vikir immediately channeled a significant amount of aura energy into his sword. He then flew straight at the creature with the released spearheads. The spearheads promptly embedded deeply into the Troll's thick hide. Seizing the opportunity when the Troll was defenseless, Vikir swiftly delivered a decisive blow. Seeing the Troll lying motionless on the ground, not only the children, but even Hugo himself were utterly astonished. The entire arena was abuzz with the question, "What have we just witnessed?" A week passed, and now Vikir was seated in the dining hall. Before him was a bowl of miscellaneous meat porridge. Though he had eaten this dish countless times, he still found it hard to swallow. Out of nowhere, a convoy of vehicles arrived at the Baskerville family castle. Shortly afterward, inside a grand palace hall, it turned out that Hugo was meeting with Adolf Morgue, the patriarch by proxy of the Morgue clan. Initially, there were no conflicts between the renowned mage clan, the Morgues, and the iron-blooded sword clan, the Baskerville. They even followed the Emperor's orders and trained together. However, things changed when they disputed over a ruby mine. Despite the disagreement, they had to continue their joint training due to the Emperor's command. After discussing their shared training, Adolf brought up Vikir. Finally, he called a girl named Camus into the room. To everyone's surprise, as soon as Camus spoke, she demanded that Hugo return the ruby mine to her family. Not only that, she insulted him, calling him the annoying chin-beard thief. Hugo couldn't contain his anger and lost his temper. As the tension in the room grew, John brought Vikir in. Seeing Vikir, Camus immediately approached him. According to Vikir, Camus would become the iron-blooded empress of the Morgue clan. After a brief exchange, Vikir managed to provoke her. Expecting her to attack with her green energy powers, Camus surprised everyone by creating an ice sculpture. Even after an explanation, Camus still believed the ruby mine should belong to her family. After demonstrating both families' territories on the virtual model, she suddenly reached out towards Vikir and asked a perplexing question. Here, then, whose arm is this? Her intention was to claim Vikir's family territory. Though he understood, Vikir pretended not to and asked, "You're asking whose arm it is that's in my land?" Without waiting for her response, he quickly grabbed her hand. Camus became flustered, and her cheeks turned red. Just when it seemed like a pleasant moment, Vikir pulled out a dagger. Vikir gripped the dagger tightly and smirked, saying, "I'm saying that your arm is mine." While Camus was still bewildered, he swiftly pressed the dagger against her hand. Hearing his niece's cry for help, Adolf immediately rushed towards Vikir with a menacing look, as if he wanted to tear into him. Vikir immediately let go of Camus's hand. Camus ran to hug her uncle and burst into tears. But when she realized it was just a fake dagger, she became really angry. Although Vikir apologized, she still refused to forgive him. Finally, the friendly duels between the two families began. This match was an opportunity for children aged 8 to 15 to fight against each other. This year, the most anticipated match was between Vikir and Camus. At this moment, the two prodigies from both families stepped onto the arena. Their fight followed the practical training rules. As soon as the bell rang, Camus immediately cast a spell to summon her magic. Now, not only did a magic circle appear under her feet, but there were also 3 more magic circles with different colors behind her. According to the spectators, she was using quadracasting. She shouted a signal and then 3 streams of power shot straight toward Vikir, one like lightning, one resembling fire, and the remaining one akin to ice. After dodging each of the energy streams Camus sent towards him, Vikir reminded her to focus on just one type of magic. But Camus didn't listen and quickly summoned a sand wall. Surprisingly, with a light footstep, Vikir destroyed the sand wall she had worked hard to create. While she was still in shock, he charged at her. One might think he was going to attack her, but instead, he gently flicked her forehead. Apparently, he used a bit too much force, so she fell backward. After getting up with a bump on her forehead, Camus summoned 2 more sand walls. As Vikir destroyed the sand wall in front of him with his bare hands, he immediately flicked her forehead again. Already struggling to figure out how to deal with her, he noticed someone on the opposite side of the arena using flame magic. Before dodging, he told her, "You better have a defensive spell ready." As he said that, she saw a large fire coming straight at her from behind him. After a loud and dazzling explosion, Camus found herself sitting amidst the dense smoke, with her clothes partially burnt. She felt anxious, worried that someone might see her in this terrible state. Unexpectedly, Vikir approached and covered her head with his coat, leaving her astonished. They were rivals, so she couldn't understand why he was protecting her like that. The battle appeared to have come to an end, and the onlookers started evaluating the situation, saying, "The Lady of Morgue is on the floor, but the one bleeding is the young Baskerville." It's hard to determine who won the battle. As they walked down the hallway, Hugo briefly talked to his son about the previous fight. Hugo advised him that leading his guard down in battle would lead to injury, and he should take that injury as a lesson for the future. Seeing Hugo showing concern for him for the first time, Vikir was a bit incredulous. In the past, Hugo had always been cold, grumpy, and quite violent, not showing any care like this. Suddenly, Hugo brought up a question. What do you think we should do with the ruby mine? Drawing from past experiences, Vikir didn't hesitate to suggest giving up the mine. The Baskerville family's main goal was to establish a vast territory, and the mine was located in the Red All Mountain, so the monsters and barbarians living there would become a problem. If they could utilize the Morgue clan well, they might be able to minimize the losses incurred during the expansion into that region. Vikir proposed letting the Morgue family control it since they would assign a great number of people there. In the future, they could put monsters and barbarians into that region and take care of all the problems at once. Hugo felt quite satisfied with this almost 90% identical thought and couldn't help but pat Vikir's head. As they continued walking and talking, they coincidentally encountered Adolf Morgue and his niece. They settled in a private room to discuss matters. According to Adolf, an engagement between the two families would help peacefully resolve the issue of the ruby mine, and he had his eye on the eldest child of both families, despite the age difference. Adolf believed that Camus was a child prodigy, both in appearance and knowledge, and she would be a perfect match for the genius eldest son of the Baskerville family. Hugo didn't rush to respond, but instead asked, "My eldest is 25 this year. I'm sure you're aware of the age gap?" Adolf still supported the idea, as a 17-year gap didn't bother him. Surprisingly, Camus was the one who objected. She stated that she preferred someone stronger than her mother, and even someone of the same age or younger. Adolf understood her wishes from her expression and panicked, asking her to reconsider, as Vikir was a child with the Van surname, not one of the Lee descent, and couldn't be compared to their eldest son. Hugo frowned at his negative comment, considering it a personal matter and choosing not to interfere, leaving him to sort it out on his own. Vikir didn't hesitate and accepted the engagement. After Vikir calmly agreed to this major decision, Adolf was utterly surprised, but deep down, he still opposed it. However, after hearing some kind words from Hugo about his son, Adolf's attitude seemed to change significantly. Adolf silently evaluated him and then requested a private conversation. This wasn't a request as the deputy patriarch of the Morgue clan, but a request as an uncle. Seeing the other party's insistence, Hugo didn't object anymore and simply nodded in agreement. The two, one adult and one young, didn't engage in a regular conversation. Instead, they agreed to meet on the battlefield. Adolf used magic to create a pot of water and placed it on his head, challenging Vikir, "If you manage to force a single drop to fall, it's your victory." Vikir took a few minutes to come up with a plan and then directly charged to face Adolf with his sword. But then Camus suddenly yelled, "You can't run straight towards Uncle!" True to her advice, a shield magic immediately appeared, providing a solid defense. Adolf quickly launched a counterattack with magic to push Vikir back. But Vikir was no longer the weak kid from his past life. With his combat experience, he effortlessly dodged everything and swiftly counterattacked, targeting a specific point on the magical shield with numerous strikes. Seeing Vikir's futile efforts, Adolf sneered and looked down on him, believing his shield was tough enough. Even in the final strike, Vikir's sword coincidentally broke in half, and Adolf was sure that he had won the battle. Adolf was delighted in his victory and teased Vikir while giving him advice to reevaluate the shield and sword's durability. However, the spectators outside suddenly had their expressions changed. Adolf was too confident and too arrogant. He didn't realize that the container on his head had been hit by a piece of the broken sword, causing water to leak out continuously. Everything went according to Vikir's plan, and at that moment, he chuckled and said, "Seems like it's full." I was talking about the pot, of course. Time flew by, and 7 years later, at the training ground, a group of kids gathered, casually chatting about which night order they would join. Though the others had managed to defeat an ox bear, Vikir effortlessly took down a much larger one. Some even marveled that he had achieved the third technique, equivalent to the Shadowhound's level, at such a young age. Despite the admiration from his peers, Vikir wasn't entirely content with his progress. He felt he was advancing slower than he had planned. Just then, the butler John approached, informing Vikir that Hugo was seeking him out as the assignment had been decided. In his previous life, at this very stage, Vikir became a junior knight of the Pitbull Order, facing numerous life-threatening situations for 21 hours at Le Rouge at Le Noir Mountain, akin to a piece of rotten meat cast aside. To Vikir's surprise, this time around, Hugo had something different in mind. He proposed that Vikir become a lower house of parliament. The role was straightforward, involving handling various family matters. The lower house of parliament assisted the Baskerville clan's regional administration, legislature, and law enforcement, as well as inviting businesses and looking after the region as necessary. Hugo added, "The position you will be taking is the deputy consul of the Underdog city. Would you like to try it?" Vikir nodded, accepting the offer. But before finalizing things, he brought up the ongoing dispute over the ruby mine with the Morgue family. He didn't seek a reward, he simply wished to borrow it. The decision was met with success due to Vikir's unwavering determination. As they walked back to his room, the butler John chuckled, mentioning that Hugo held Vikir in high regard based on this decision. However, Vikir remained indifferent. He couldn't forget the experiences of his past life and vowed to make Hugo feel the pain he had endured. His ultimate goal was to destroy Hugo and the entire family. As soon as Vikir arrived in the city of Underdog, he stood in the town square and gathered everyone to make an announcement. He confidently declared that he was the newly appointed deputy consul and reminded them that the Baskerville family's laws would still be in effect and unchanged. Seeing a 15-year-old boy in such a position of authority, many people looked down on him and questioned his ability to enforce the law effectively. They couldn't help but wonder how such a young boy could handle such a responsibility. However, Vikir paid no attention to their doubts and didn't waste time arguing with them. Instead, he took a wooden pole and with great force, thrust it into the ground. The ground beneath him instantly collapsed, showcasing his incredible power and determination. After this display, Vikir informed everyone that would announce a special with the authority of Deputy Consul. Vikir's Special Law Section 1, Clause 1. He would award 100 million gold to whoever succeeded in removing this stake. The whole town square was in an uproar over a reward of 100 million gold. People were confused, and there was a mix of loud and soft voices discussing it. Even after waiting for a while, no one dared to step up and take the challenge. So, Vikir introduced Vikir Special Law Section 1, Clause 2, raising the reward to a whopping 1 billion gold. 100 million was 4 times the average salary, and 1 billion sounded much more significant. So, some people scoffed, saying that he was making fun of them, stop fooling around and just go to sleep. It's not like 1 billion gold is chump change. Since everyone looked down on Vikir's words, he had no choice but to announce another new clause, increasing the reward to 10 billion gold. His icy stare made it clear that he was serious. Seeing the serious expression of the wealthy noble, different from his previous appearances, people in the crowd started questioning whether they should step forward and try their luck. However, they were all afraid of the sword Vikir carried, except for a little flower girl. An old man quickly tried to stop the girl, warning her that she might be killed. But the girl's mother was very ill, leaving her no other option but to try her luck. To everyone's surprise, the girl easily lifted the wooden pole, and Vikir rewarded her with 100 million gold. He promised to deliver the rest to her family shortly. The welcome event ended well, with Vikir happily patting the girl's head and explaining that his actions were just a test to prove that laws must always be obeyed. Those who obeyed the law would be rewarded, while those who disobeyed would be punished. This simple logic touched the hearts of the citizens. After that event and the introduction of Vikir's special law, there was a significant reduction in illegal activities and crimes in the city. In his office, Vikir spread out a map on the table and discussed with the General Secretary Chihuahua about how he had generously given away 10 billion gold and now needed to work to make up for that amount. His plan was to clean up illegal organizations that were hiding in the city, dismantle them, and seize their black money to replenish the public treasury. While they were still discussing their plans, a frightened employee rushed in to inform the Village Hall's Youth Autonomy Association has requested a meeting. Chihuahua explained that the Village Hall's Youth Autonomy Association consisted of the 7 clans of Baskerville. It was an organization that was founded by the 2 and 3 generations of the 7 native families of Baskerville. In fact, it was just a promiscuous social club. While the other 2 were worried about the presence of this group, Vikir smiled and calmly said, "Then, shall we start annihilating the pests that are eating away at the city?" In the most luxurious VIP room of the city's top-notch hotel, 7 members who held important positions in the Youth Autonomy Association were having a celebration. They were toasting and cheering for their successful slave trading and brushing off any misdeeds, as Baskerville's main concern was expanding their territory. The leader, a guy with blonde hair, came up with a wicked idea to throw a lavish party with expensive items and plenty of women, and then pass the bill to the newly appointed deputy consul as a prank to taunt him and assert their power. After that, some female servers were called in. However, one of the servers noticed an uninvited guest among them. The guy grabbed Vikir's hair and yelled loudly. He entered with such confidence that nobody questioned him. "Hey, kid, what do you think you're doing here?" The entire room suddenly fell silent, and then the server let out a shrill scream as he realized that his arm had just been broken by a 15-year-old kid. In front of the village hall's Youth Autonomy Association, Vikir introduced himself and used his mana manipulation to force the champagne tower to explode just by touching the table. This bold and forceful introduction surprised the 7 teenagers, and Vikir didn't stop there. He approached one of them and exposed their prank plan that they had just discussed. He even delivered a strong punch to the guy's stomach, causing him to bleed. Vikir stated, "An owner can test their dog, but that's not the case the other way around. A dog should never trust their owner, no matter the situation. Are you unmoved since you have money and power? That's only because you've never seen something truly frightened before." He continued to demonstrate his power. Vikir seized him like a seasoned hunter. Then he forcefully hurled the man to the ground. Placing one foot on his face, he warned the others that they needed a serious lesson if they still failed to understand the gravity of their actions. Seeing the blood under Vikir's foot, the other 6 turned hostile and wanted to attack him. However, Vikir swiftly got close to them, revealing all the evil deeds they had committed, such as abduction, kidnapping, illegal slave trafficking, insulting Baskerville, and numerous other vile acts. He made it clear that animals didn't learn until someone taught them. As another one fell down after Vikir's attack, he finally smiled wickedly and said softly, "Now, then, let's see what I can do to teach a disobedient creature a lesson." After the first crackdown, the Youth Autonomy Association was rounded up and taken to a detention center with their bodies battered and bruised, awaiting the death penalty. Word of their arrest quickly spread throughout the city. Just as the people had predicted, the 7 clans each came to meet Vikir one by one, offering gifts as a way to apologize, hoping their children could stay in the city and face only reprimands from their parents or clan leaders. However, when the 7 heads that were preserved with salt were hung in the middle of the city square and accompanied by notice boards detailing their alleged crimes, everyone fell silent in the face of Vikir's stern enforcement of Baskerville's law. Standing in his room, looking out over the city square, Vikir said to the secretary Chihuahua, "After hearing our war cry, they will start to use their heads. Once the destruction of either party begins, Underdog City will go through a bloodbath." He smiled and turned to the stunned man behind him, advising him to mentally prepare because he was about to become a part of Vikir's next plan. That plan was to go undercover as a slave and infiltrate their hideout outside the Underdog City. In a huge tent that was set up in the middle of nowhere, luxurious carriages started to gather. Today was the day where the slave auction began. Of course, this unlawful event was not reported to the Baskerville family. The products were kidnapped barbarians, nobles, and commoners. At the entrance of the venue, the secretary Chihuahua posed as a noble from the Mont Blanc clan, there to sell the items inside an iron cage. That night, amidst bright lights and a large crowd, the first item up for bidding was an A-rank monster that was said to have 19 hearts, named Mershel, and a fully exploitable body. The bids on the boards went higher and higher until this item was finally sold for an astounding 250 million. The next items were brought up one by one, but among them, the Barbarian of Balak was the only slave for whom no one placed a bid. She was taken away forcefully, and the protagonist of the day took her place. Vikir, disguised as a slave, stepped forward, causing a commotion in the auction hall with his appearance. Many bids were shouted out, and heated arguments filled the air. However, when the bid of 6 billion was suddenly announced, the auction for this slave was immediately closed. The nobleman Baron Gambino from the granary was the one who made the bid, an astronomical sum that few could match. Due to this staggering price, Vikir was promptly sold to Gambino. He approached the man he had been waiting for and raised his hands in the air. Gambino thought Vikir wanted to be freed, but Vikir acted swiftly, breaking free from the iron chains and delivering a kick that caused the man to stumble and fall. Not stopping there, Vikir continued his assault. He placed his hand on the man's body and squeezed hard, causing him to writhe in pain and eventually pass out. Only then did Vikir remove his long hair and introduce himself to everyone. It felt exhilarating to be back as his true self, and he grinned with a bloodthirsty expression. "Everyone here, don't think you can return in one piece." The host yelled out, "Who cares if he's the deputy consul or not? He doesn't even have any weapons. Just kill him! The group of tough young men rushed in immediately, but Vikir stood firm in front of them without showing any fear. Then, he quickly pulled out a weapon named Beelzebub, which formed from aura and killed the entire group. A graduator at just 15 years old, this astonished everyone present. The host and others were in a panic. He glanced at the general secretary, Chihuahua, and got an idea to kidnap him as a hostage to force Vikir to stop the fight. Though frightened, he tried to sound tough. Drop your weapon right now and surrender. If you don't, your comrade will lose his life. Hurry up. Do you not hear what I'm saying? Even with a knife against his throat, Chihuahua stubbornly refused to give in. He shouted that he'd rather die than harm his master. But his sweaty face betrayed his own words. Vikir couldn't help but burst into laughter. In just a second, he took out a special toy he had kept with him for a long time. It was a whistle, and the piercing sound made everyone cover their ears in pain. As they waited for something to happen after the sound stopped, the host thought it was just a bluff and laughed mockingly at Vikir. Unfortunately, before he could say much, a sharp sword suddenly sliced across his throat, silencing him instantly. From the shadows emerged a group of knights dressed in black cloaks, carrying sharp swords. The teeth symbol on their chests struck fear into everyone's hearts. They were the Empire's most brutal knight order known as the Annihilation Experts. All 100 knights from it were graduators. It was the Baskerville clan's Pitbull Knight Order. Suddenly, one of the knights appeared behind the assistant of the male noble. She thought her life was over, but Vikir quickly stepped in to stop any harm. He ordered them, rip the rest to shreds and kill them. Don't kill those who are lying down obediently. However, if they move even a little, kill them relentlessly. The shocking scene, not suitable for young viewers, quickly unfolded. Meanwhile, the commander of the Pitbull Knights, Boston Terrier Baskerville, approached his cold-blooded nephew. He said, "Come to the Pitbull Knights later. I'll make sure to raise you properly." The invitation sounded tempting, but Vikir said he would think about it. He found his uncle rather annoying and not wanting to get involved with such a bothersome group. Leaving the intense commotion outside, Vikir went straight to the merchant's warehouse. He found their money safe, and with the amount of black money he obtained, it seemed that this year's taxes would be taken care of. Vikir was on a quest to find something, but before that, he happened to pull off a covering from an iron cage. Inside, he found the Barbarian of Barbaric, lying there, struggling to breathe. Vikir sat down next to her to check her numerous wounds, and soon discovered that she had been tormented when she was dragged here. His conscience kicked in, and he couldn't bear to let her die, so he used a red liquid from the knights to heal her. He waited until she woke up and used her language to urge her to leave quickly. Having fought with the barbarians countless times in his previous life, he came to know the basics of their language, though not very fluently. From her expression when she was about to leave, he could tell that she wanted to thank him. Returning to the main matter, Vikir approached the Murcielago's corpse and let his favorite weapon eat it before Pitbull Knights arrived. The talk of the new deputy consul destroying the criminal organization spread in an instant. As soon as the sun rose, rumors started to spread that the nobles and other participants of the illegal slave auction were taken to the Underdog city prison with their limbs torn off. And that day, the largest demon's den of the Underdog city, the entire club building of burning suspension burnt down and disappeared. The heads of the club's VIPs were put on display as a stern warning, putting an end to any criminal activities. After the 7 original clans who lost their children sent in their written protests to the administrative office, they received back numerous accusations and had to stop their arrogant actions. They came to Vikir, begging for forgiveness, but the outcome was the same for all. We have already investigated all the black ledgers that were inside the burning suspension. In accordance with the Baskerville self-governing dominions, the 7 families' assets will be confiscated, and on the charge of treason, 3 generations will be destroyed. Under Vikir's new laws, blood was shed on the execution grounds for several days, but in return, illegal activities were punished and the city's welfare was restored. One evening, after a busy period, Vikir paid a visit to the prison to meet Cindy Wendy Sen Rose, the female assistant who often accompanied the chubby male noble. After blindfolding her, he explained that he had a few questions to ask. If she answered honestly, he would release her, but if not, she would deeply regret it. Vikir asked her directly, "What's your impression? Do you think I'm enforcing the law well?" The question seemed simple, but when Cindy Wendy answered that everything he did was excellent, he frowned and issued a threat. She was exposed too easily, and she had no choice but to confess that he was heading in the wrong direction. Vikir walked straight up to Cindy Wendy and gave her a stern and threatening look before calmly returning to his seat and asking her to explain the reasons. Cindy Wendy tried to suppress her anxiety as she explained that as a consul, one of the main factors considered to be important was virtue. While he might create laws that took care of the street criminals and raised his dignity, many citizens would soon die and suffer from some of those laws, and in the long term, he would garner hatred and rage from the people. Additionally, the Baskervilles wouldn't be so welcoming of him once he gained more power than the clan leader in the Underdog city. In short, it meant receiving hatred from the citizens and becoming a threat targeted by the Baskerville family. Vikir listened quietly to her words, then asked her what he should do. Cindy Wendy advised him to give back all his authority to the Baskerville family and the glory of the events that happened here. To avoid drawing attention, he should go to either the Mount Le Rouge at Le Noir or the Academy in the center of the empire. Those places were where people of his age and status were common, which would help him to hide his powers and wash his identity. When the time came, the Baskerville clan leader would be the one who suffered in his stead. Her final advice was that as a hunting dog, he should bite off his own owner's neck, as it was the only way for him to avoid his hatred. Keeping his promise to himself after getting the answer he sought, Vikir used a key to unlock the handcuffs and set her free. However, just as she took a few steps away, he asked a question that made her pause. "Do you know of a clan called Messima Dunaro?" Before she could answer, Vikir revealed the story of the 8th family that had been wiped out. The reason was that their youngest son had performed the secret Baskerville sword technique that only members of the Baskerville family knew during his birthday. This insult led to the Baskerville releasing the hunting dogs, causing the Messima Dunaro clan to go extinct. However, there was someone pulling the strings behind everything. The young demons of the 7 clans stole the sword techniques from the Baskerville family, and they allowed the young child of the Messima Dunaro clan to learn the techniques. Thus, when he arrived here, he took action to punish them and make them bear the consequences of their crimes. Vikir had already figured out that the girl in front of him was the last surviving member of the Messima Dunaro family. He decided to take her to a room in the asylum where she could see the apology letter written by those men themselves. The horrifying scene overwhelmed Cindy Wendy, making her collapse on her knees and vomit. Nevertheless, Vikir didn't stop there. He told her that if she wanted revenge, there were still many things to do in the future. Cindy Wendy was clever enough to understand his intentions and left an honorable promise that whatever Vikir might do with the rest of his life, she would make sure that he would never have to worry about money again. Then she left. Another day came, and the manager, Chihuahua, cheerfully opened the door to call Vikir to work. However, to his surprise, he found his master lying amidst a battlefield full of blood and corpses. After cleaning everything up and going outside, Vikir told Chihuahua that he had been continuously targeted with poison arrows, acid, snipers, arson, and other things, suspecting he had indeed drawn attention and become hated. But thanks to the river sticks and tough life enhancing his body, even the graduator class assassin couldn't pierce his skin, and he survived those assassination attempts. As they walked and talked, they suddenly noticed a horse-drawn carriage waiting in front of the office, seemingly there for a while. Chap 25. The butler, John, stepped down from the carriage and walked up to Vikir to deliver a message. The Patriarch has praised your progress, and he has ordered you to return to the main residence. He seemed very happy about it. Vikir headed back home, but there was no friendly smile to be found, only his father's stern expression. Hugo had decided to send him to the best academy Colosso for further studies. It was an academy where the children of aristocracy and royal families attended. However, before that, he wanted Vikir to go on an inspection of the ruby mine and check whether the laws he altered were being upheld. Following the orders, Vikir immediately set out with a few members of the Pitbull Order for the survey. However, when they reached the city gate, the Morgue's 3 flowers blocked their entry. Each of them was insane. So it was said that when together, their insanity reached the heavens. Vikir called out, "We're from the envoy team from the Baskervilles. We've come to inspect the territory and for the betterment of friendly relations. Open the fortress gates." To his surprise, they responded, "Not now. I have to report to the person in charge, so wait. I assume we'll get a reply about tomorrow." Being denied entry by the land lessees made Vikir lose his friendliness. He then mentioned that he would change the law to have the authority to expel tenants he didn't approve of. Finally, he firmly asked them to open the gate once more. He had tried to keep the peace until the last moment, but one of the girls attacked him with magic and taunted, "If I tell you to wait, you'll wait." "How dare a stupid swordsman? You can't enter the Morgue's land without permission. Or shall we determine how strong the rising star of the Baskerville family is?" The annoyance was right in front of him, leaving Vikir exhausted. And just then, three more equally troublesome individuals appeared. Seeing the trio from the Baskerville family, Vikir's face scrunched up in irritation. Well, it seemed trouble had tripled, all thanks to their enthusiastic involvement. In the future, the triplets would grow up to become murderous soldiers. The battle was raging, and those left became unintentional spectators. Before his regression, the Morgue triplets were known as mages who possessed the three attributes earth, water, and nature. Their combination of three highly compatible attributes exponentially increased the effects of each of their magic by tenfold. So, they were known as the Morgue's Three Flowers. Vikir stood aside, having a chat with the leader of the Pitbull Order, Staffordshire. They were comparing the power of magic and swords, debating which was mightier. Magic used the mana surrounding the user and reproduced the power of an element while amplifying it, whereas swordsmanship used the mana within the user, as well as their energy to create a long-standing explosive power. As an onlooker, the battle was quite entertaining, but as a supervisor, Vikir had many tasks to handle. He wished he could rush in and deal with all the troublesome folks at once. Suddenly, a voice called out, "What are you all doing in front of my territory?" In response, a massive column of fire erupted, aiming at the 6 fighters near the city gate. Vikir wondered if they were all done for, but to his surprise, they remained unscathed, albeit a bit shaken by the attack. The one who brought the chaos to a halt was Miss Camus, a beautiful woman standing on the city wall. After settling a dispute among her 3 younger sisters, she came to see who was causing a commotion. She recognized her future husband among the crowd and greeted him shyly. "Long time no see, Vikir Van Baskerville. It's been 7 years, right?" Vikir remembered her and offered a polite smile. "It has been a while," Camus mourned. In his memory, she was a stunning lady who could capture the hearts of males in high society. Many married men were allured to her, but that wasn't what mattered to him now. Skirting small talk, Vikir asked her directly to open the gate. Unfortunately, his request seemed to upset Camus, who pointed at his face and scolded, "What? It's been a while since we last met, but that's the only thing you have to say. 0 points. What's with that attitude you have toward your future wife? 0 points out of 100. Despite being upset, Camus still let Vikir's group inside. While patrolling, they discussed the Barbaric tribe. Camus asked, "So, the issue here is among the Barbaric tribes, which is the most annoying?" Vikir replied, "The warrior tribe, Balak, and the sorcerer tribe, Rococo. The strength of the Balak's bowmanship, especially, is on a completely different level to the Empire. And that principle isn't well known either." Satisfied with his knowledge, Camus gave him 8 points to make up for what he lost. She explained that the barbarians ambushed the ruby mine, so they were either pillaging the indigenous slaves or the crops. The reason why they were taking the slaves was so that they could sell them somewhere else. As they explored, they reached a wall that both earth and iron mages had built for a month. Camus showed Vikir the traces of the arrows that the Balak shot. She said the arrows they shot had a strong aura infused to them. During the night, there were countless people who died after getting shot when they were on guard duty. Since they were able to break through walls that were 2 to 3 meters thick, their talent was unmatched. Because of the arrows that broke through the shield's magic, her uncle suffered from a severe chest injury. This reminded Vikir of a similar experience with the Patriarch, leaving a scar on his nose. Curious, he asked if Camus knew the most exceptional person among the barbarians, but she only knew it was a woman. As they conversed, a messenger arrived and reported that the search party had captured a recon member of the barbarians. In the Morgue family's tent, they held some demon-like figures with strange tattoos. The messenger said he was from the Rococo sorcerer tribe. He was very powerful, and they couldn't extract information or read his mind. Camus approached one and asked if they had captured her 6th cousin Rose a few days ago. But no one understood their language or could translate for the barbarians' captives. Suddenly, Vikir stepped forward, explaining that he knew some of the Rococo tribe's language and offered to help. He translated Camus's questions to the captive, who responded with a harsh and cruel expression. "She's dead." Vikir conveyed the message to Camus. Shocked, Camus couldn't control her anger and sentenced the captive to death. The moment the verdict was announced, a sharp object pierced through the barbarian's body, followed by a burst of magic, incinerating him. Seeing the enemy cursing in an incomprehensible language, Camus angrily said, "After this war is finished, The language that you speak will only be used in hell." She stormed out, weeping. Vikir followed her. She asked him if what she heard earlier was right. What he said was, "We ate her." He wanted to confirm if it was true. Unable to answer, Vikir could only stand beside the crying her, offering silent comfort while she vented her sadness and anger.